Hi, this is John Barton from JB Cases. How you guys doing? So I'm gonna do a quick video here. Well, it's never quick. You guys know that by now when you're watching me. But there's a discussion going on Facebook about a gentleman asked about our cases and like what's the big deal, and a lot of people answered, you know, how they were happy with it and satisfied. And another gentleman answered and he said that Instroke cases are way better than JB cases. The comments were something along the lines of not in the same universe. The Instroke cases are more costly, but they're heavier, but they're way better than JB cases. So there's a couple things going on here with this to unpack. A lot of you know that I owned Instroke, the company. I founded it. I took on partners, and then in 2003 I sold my stake in the company, or in the name, and so I just got out completely. And I took a break for about 4 years, and then in 2007 I started making cases again. And I haven't really said this on video a lot, because I haven't really wanted to make a lot of comparisons to my former brand and my current brand, because it's kind of like my kids, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of that the brand is still going and doing really well. Well, I don't actually know how well they're doing, but I still see the cases sold, and I see them at several outlets. But I think that I should, in light of people making comments like this, I think it's important that I explain a little bit more about why I didn't continue with that brand and why I am, doing my own thing right now. So when I started Instroke, when I started building cases, I did it because my cue fell out of a case that I had, and I wanted to build a case that would protect my cue in case the case was turned over. So if it was inverted, I wanted it to be safe, and then I'd reach in and take the cue out. And as time went on, I didn't want it to rattle, I didn't want it to move, but I wanted it to be easy to get out of the case. So that was the main reason I did it. Now, this thread on Facebook started because a gentleman said, "Hey, what's the big deal about JB cases? The Porper cases were way better," and so on. And Porper is a brand, that I had before. Actually, my first real hard case was a Porper, and the cues did fit snugly. And when I went to rebuild the interior of the case that I didn't like, the one that damaged let my cue fall out, my goal was to rebuild that interior to make it work like my Porper. So it's important that we're going to unpack a lot here in this video, and we're going to go through a little bit of history of cases here in a way. And in order to do that, I'm going to explain a few different things about the way that Instroke cases are built, my thinking on it, and why I left, the reason that I left, and how they're built now compared to when I left, and why I think that this gentleman is wrong about the cases being better. Now, he also said that aesthetics is no contest, which means looks, beauty, appearance. To that, I just say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And the look that we created with Instroke became very, very popular, and a lot of people like that. And we do make that similar style with JB cases, of course, because I wanted to continue the look that I created. However, it's different, slightly different, and the construction is way better. So I personally don't agree with him that JB cases or that Instroke cases look better than JB cases if they're a similar style. However, I was when he said, the comment was that the Instroke cases are heavier and they cost more, but they're worth it, is what he said. It struck me that maybe that gentleman doesn't even know that we make leather cases, that JB makes leather cases. And a lot of people don't, because they think that the nylon cases here is all we make, because that's what we predominantly sell. But in all actuality, when I first started back making cases, I only made leather cases. I didn't make any other style for a long time, because I wanted to explore a lot of the ideas that I had, not only in construction, but a lot of the decorative ideas that I had. And so we did a lot of leather cases at the beginning, and then as time went on, you know, around 2011, 2012, we created the rugged case that you see here, this one, and that became the most popular style that we make, because it has probably the best price to value ratio for, you know, what you get for the money. So, you know, I don't know. I think that the gentleman was also trying to say, you know, that the Instroke case is a better value than our case, and I don't even agree with that, and I will explain why. Okay, so let's start out with the Porper case, because the first gentleman that started the thread, not the same one that said Instroke is better, said that, you know, Porper cases are better in his opinion. Now, he didn't really know about our cases. As the conversation went on, you know, he said, well, he's never really seen our cases. He's seen people talking about them a lot, and he was just asking, you know, what's the big deal? So with that in mind, I want to show you guys a case here that's similar. This one is probably close to what I had, my very first hard case that I had well before I started making cases at all. This is a Porper case right here, and I'm going to go through a couple different construction techniques so that you guys understand what they are as well. So this case here is, when you have Porper cases, you'll often see a little tag inside, and it says, this says Joe Porper Classic Protect a Case. That's what it says, Protect a Case. That was the kind of the slogan. Protect a, was it Protect a Case or Protect a Q? Let me see. Protect a Q series. That's what it's called, Protect a Q series. So Joe Porper, you know, was actually the first one marketing a case where he was deliberately going after the protection. But what a lot of people don't know is that actually it was Bob Mucci who first had the idea of doing this style of case. Now, what I mean by this style is a foam core case, which is basically this. You take a steel mandrel like a Q, okay? You make a form that's like a Q, but it's all out of steel, right? And then you have a tube, also out of steel or a form, and you put these steel pieces inside of it, and then you inject foam in there, kind of like the spray insulation on your house, you know, what you can get at the store, but this is, you know, more industrial. And that stuff expands, and it forms cavities where the steel is, and then when you pull the steel out, the steel is wrapped with like a fabric or a flocking material, kind of like it's usually paper backed and sewn up. And so what happens is the foam expands around all that, and then when you pull it all out, it has the cavities formed like you see here. So that's what makes those cavities in there. So this in itself is not a bad idea. What they did was, and let me see if this one is a tapered one. Yes, it is. Good. So what they did was they made tapered cavities, so the Q would go down like that inside, and it wouldn't go the other direction. So you'll notice that how these two Qs, one went further down. I think that this guy's got something stuffed in here in the bottom to make that not go down as far. See how it started to go down a little bit more each time. So anyway, back to the case. So anyway, it's tapered, right? So you can't go, the Qs cannot go this direction because the cavity is tapered like a Q. And the same thing applies here to the shafts. Can't go down, so it can only go down one way, like this. And that's what that looks like. So in principle, that's a pretty good idea. You know, nice hard foam, feels pretty sturdy, and it's wrapped all around the Q. The problem that they ended up with was that the foam cavities would gradually keep expanding, so the cue would keep going down inside, and also sometimes the expanding foam would make its way through the seam, and it would create like a line of little beads in there. So when you're putting the cues in, it would end up scratching or dinging the finish, and excuse me, and so basically what that meant is that that your cues could be damaged. They could be scratched, they could be dinged, and also they could get stuck. So a lot of times they would just keep going down inside until they got stuck. And then a lot of times you see here how it's kind of poking the bottom right there. Let's see if you can see that. See how it's kind of poking the bottom? So a lot of times what would happen is there you go, you can see it right there. These would just tear up the bottoms, number one, and the cue would get stuck so far down in there that you'd end up having to turn the case over and actually beating on it to get the cue out. So a lot of times people would be like this, they'd be beating on it, and then if they didn't catch it in time, that's what would happen, is the cue would fall out and it'd, you know, fall on the floor or wherever. And then so over time what they did, at some point to solve this problem, they changed to a straight cavity. So it was just straight instead of tapered. Now that solved the problem of cues getting stuck like that, but then it opened up the next problem, which is a lot of cue movement. So now you still got the hard beads inside, so in some of the cavities. It wasn't in every cavity, you know, sometimes they came out perfect. And sometimes the beads, the foam would just squeeze through just a little bit and it'd be like a line of little hard rocks in there. But basically now you have the problem where everything rattles. So it moves this way, it goes up against the walls, you know, banging this way. And now you introduce vibrational stress, you introduce, you know, a lot more movement inside, a lot more chance for the case itself the case has less foam around the cue, so it's more chance for the case itself to break. Just all kinds of little problems like that. And they still didn't solve the problem of sealing up the bottom, so that just kept tearing it out and pushing it out more. So, you know, on the face of it, it looks like a pretty sturdy case, pretty good case, but at the end of the day, they just didn't hold up that well. This one actually is pretty well preserved. I found it at a pawn shop. So it actually has survived a lot better than a lot of them. But you'll notice here as well, one of the things they did is they put this foam, see this foam in here? And this stuff usually gets torn up pretty good. So you can see this piece is already tearing up right there on the end right here. And so anyway, yeah, that was some of the problems with this style of case. And so when I moved on from the Porper case, I moved to a leather case that looks something like this. Now this is a 1x2, but I had the 2x4 version of this case. This case is a JEF. It's a JEFQ case. Q, like the letter Q. It's commonly known as a J Flowers case. That was the guy, his name's making it. That's the JEF, JE Flowers. A buddy of mine brought a bunch of these back to Germany, and I bought one, and I was using it, and here's what happened. I would put my cue in like that, thinking that it was going to be safe, and then what happened is a guy knocked it off the table, and it kind of shot out like that. See how that did it just there? And it broke the butt cap. So while that case was gone, or while the cue was gone, I decided to take it apart and rebuild these tubes inside to put padding in here to keep it in. So what I did was I actually put padding at the bottom of the case, kind of I had like a little weird kind of plastic configuration inside, so when it went in, when the cue went in, it went in like this, and it kind of sucked it in and held it like that, just gently, so I could do it. And then I took down the tube a little bit, so I could actually get a hold of the cue and pull it out when I wanted it out. But it did what I wanted it to do, which was you could turn the case over, and the cue would not fall out. So at that point, I had a case, a leather case, and I had rebuilt the interior. Nobody else knew what I did. Where where you could turn it over and it wouldn't come out. So I had the first of this kind in the world with the usefulness of the Porper in the sense that it held the cue in snug, but the protection, you know, or the look of this case. So there was that. This is actually multiple tubes, by the way. So it's 3 tubes in here, and then when you have a 2x4, it's 6 tubes, and so on. And there's, you know, there's other problems with building this style that you have to overcome when you want to do the excuse me, when you want to do the snug fit inside and be able to get the cues out easily. So after I finished with that case, with building that interior, excuse me, I decided that I didn't even like this style anyway for me at that time, and I wanted to build something that was more my style, more, you know, what appealed to me. And so I decided to try to build the whole thing, you know, basically build my interior and then build a pull cue case around it with the pockets and everything the way I wanted. Now, I don't really have a surviving, you know, too many surviving pieces from that era. But this is kind of the funky style that I was making back then. And this case here, I'm going to show you so you guys can get a good look at it here. This is an example of what I was doing back then. And so you're going to see, if I take this and I put it in, now it's got the style, so you can hold it up and it doesn't come out, but you can easily reach in and just pull it out like that. And if you want to put it in this way, you could do the same thing, and it's going to stay mostly inside. This case is 30 years old now, almost 30 years old. So 1991 is when I made this case. But it's got padding right inside the lip right there, and then also it's got a little bit of padding in here. So you could, when you put it in, you know, this particular one is probably going to be easier to go this way, but you get an idea of what I was doing back then. So now we have the cue is fully encased with a tube all the way around, right? See that? So each part is in there like that, and then same thing here. You stick this in like that, and everything stays inside. Now if I shake it pretty hard, it'll come out. You know, I can make it come out. But that's not the point. The point was I wanted it to be able to just keep it in, so if it gets knocked over or something like that, it's not going anywhere. It's going to stay inside the case. It's not meant to be super shaken super hard and anything like that and then come out, because if I made it where it couldn't come out when it was shaken really hard, then by default it would be hard to even pull it out, you know, and that's not what we want. So we want it to be snug but easy to grab and take out. So that was the impulse there. And so yeah, that's the case. That's one of the ones I made back then. And this particular one, I'll show you something here. This is the reason that I have this case actually is I had given this to my dad probably around 93 or so, something like that, because what I did was I screwed up when I built it, and you'll notice that the zipper on this pocket is down here. So I got these funky pockets here, and but look what happens when you want to put something in the pocket. What do you think? So not exactly the best idea right there, right? So so actually the zipper should have been going this way, and that was just a boneheaded mistake, you know, on my part. I don't even know what I was thinking back then. But I did all this embroidery here, just a kind of an aside right there. All that embroidery right there. Now this was a patch that I bought. Somebody was selling these patches, and then I would take it and I would embroider around them. You guys can see that? I would embroider around them to kind of blend it in right there. So I thought it was a pretty cool case. You know, nice vinyl and everything, and pretty neat case. Did I get everything out of there? Okay. So that was the first Instroke cases. And then here, you can see right here, look at that. That's what I did. I did all that embroidery as well. So I did about, 100 or so of these, And then we decided to start moving into a mass production type deal. And with that, I went to this style here. So this was the style, and you can kind of see a similar style there. And here I have, you'll notice that we recessed the tubes in there. I don't know if you guys can really see that. Let me walk over here so get it on camera. Oh, sorry, I got some kind of weird setup here. So there we go. So I recessed the tubes so that now you could end up grabbing the cue. So you could take it and put it in like that, or this way. See how that fits all the way in there? And then you could take it and turn it upside down and nothing's falling out. But if you want it out, you just simply reach in and grab it that easily. So that was the idea behind that. And then these tubes are further down. Same thing. Now you can just reach in, find the shaft, and pull it out. So that was the next evolution of the interior in the case right here. This is a 2x2 right here. So also a pretty good case, but you can see there's things here that got beat up on it. You know, it's loose here. There's a lot of a learning curve that went on with building these cases. A lot of times you get the case done and you think, wow, this is really solid. It feels really good. And then you find out when people start using it, you start to see where the problems are. Okay, so back to Porper real quick. This is another Porper case, and you'll see that some of the problems with the way that they would tear up on here. This is the foam core. That's what the foam looks like, that yellow foam right there. And this was basically what they would do. They would build this case, and then they would take a piece of felt and just kind of stick it on there. And so at first that seems really nice, right? You look on there and all you see is this nice looking piece of felt there, and it feels really strong. But if you actually were to feel inside of here and feel, if you could feel further down, you'd feel all the little beads and hard spots in there and understand what was going on with that. This one's interesting. For some reason they have some, I guess they finally decided to put some kind of buttons on the bottom. That's like line snaps. That's what he used for feet on the bottom, I guess. So I've never actually looked at that, and that's interesting. But anyway, that's another one of the styles that he was doing there. So, but again, you know, it's one of those use cases, right? You make it and you think, wow, this is great, but you never really know how it's going to hold up until it gets out in the field and people start using it. So there's that one. Then here's another one here. Oh, I know I don't wanted to show you with that. It was the cavities. Here. So this one has, I think, straight cavities. Nope, this one has tapered cavities as well. And you can see how that one went in. So it only goes in one way, but it still rattles a little bit. But now it's really loose and it falls out instead of going all the way down. So anyway, there's that. So eventually at some point they went to a straight cavity. Let's see if this one has a straight cavity. Okay, this one has a straight cavity. Now this one is a Ron Thomas. So this one is also foam core, but it has a straight cavity inside, so it goes down. So this is like a kind of a hybrid between a foam core case and an It's George or a Giuseppe style. I mean, they all blend a little bit, but that type of pocket stuck on there like that is that's what that was all about right there. It was just a blending of different styles of cases there with the foam core inside. But that was a straight cavity inside. So, kind of getting off track here. All right, here's another Porper. This one was done, the leather part of it I think was done in Mexico. And then, so it's got, you know, some little bit of tooling and stuff on it. And you'll see the label on this one is in the lid for that one. Let's see if we got straight cavity. Nope, that one's got a, also got the cavity in there. So you see how that goes in? And then I can sit there and turn it over and then nothing happens on there. So there you go. That was basically what I was going for when I was building it. So you can see here, you know, and I'm just showing you guys this stuff, not because I really want to knock Porp or anything. I just want to show you from use. You know, so if you look here, you can see how this is coming apart. Right here, down here, the stitching and everything's coming out. This is very thin leather. So it's tooled leather, but it's actually pretty much the thinnest leather that it can be and still be tooled. So you'll see we got some tooling going on here. We got kind of cards, stuff like that. But it's also tearing up a lot right here, for example. See how this lid is all torn up? Because it's actually very thin leather. So it's not really good leather for this use here. And I'm telling you that for a reason, because I'm going to get to the point about Instroke and JB case comparison in just a moment. Because I'm basically building cases now that I hope will never end up this way with normal use. You know what I mean? So you'd have to abuse it. You'd have to really abuse it to make it end up this way. All right, so moving on here. So then, you know, we had other cases. This is a I think this is a Dennis Swift. Yeah, it's a Dennis Swift. Let's see. Handcrafted by Swift, I think so. And this case here also has tubes inside. So you can see when it goes in. And that actually, with the heavy thick felt, holds it in a little bit better. Still rattles a little bit. Let's see what happens when we put it in this way. So if we put it in that way, now it's going to fall out, you know, so it's not holding it both directions. But actually, if you put it in this way a little bit, it does hold a little bit. So you got a little bit of extra hold in there, so that's not bad. The downside to that, using this heavy woolen, you know, kind of not wool, but this heavy felt, is this stuff likes to absorb moisture. So it likes to hold moisture like a paper towel around your cue. So we don't like that, you know. And then, but you know, all in all, a pretty good case. It's pretty heavy duty. This is much heavier duty leather than the one I just showed you. You know, these cases tend to hold up pretty well over time. So, you know, that's Dennis Swift. Now this part right here, I can see this has already been repaired. That's not a good idea, and I think that he's gotten away from that now, because whenever you hold it, you're actually pulling against that rivet, which is not a good idea. So, whenever you're holding it on your shoulder. And I'm sorry if I criticize a little bit while I'm going through. I can't help it, because I have to kind of say something about what I see on the construction techniques, which you'll understand as we go through the cases, and you'll understand why I do what I do now, because it's a lot of experimentation that we went through. I've studied a lot of cases. Over the years, I've had a lot of cases, and I've used a lot, and I've seen a lot of how the cases have held up, not only ours, but other people's, over time. And I talk to people and I ask them about the use cases and how they're being used, how long they've had it, and so on. And that gives me a better idea of what I need to do to improve for the durability and the usability of the case. All right, so moving on here. This is another like kind of mass production style right here. This is the cowboy style. That's what I called it, is the cowboy. Basically these scallops right here, like that. And this is pretty much the case that ended up being the most popular for the Instroke line right there. Now you'll notice here, this is now I'm going to tell you about what happened with Instroke as far as construction compared to now. How they're built now as compared to how they were built when I had the cases. So when I had the company, I always insisted that they be built with padding. I mean, that was part of the reason why I left the company, was because the agreement between myself and my partners was that I would have absolute control over how the cases were built. And as time went on, whenever I wanted to make changes to the cases for the better, we had to have just endless debates and arguments and design by committee And, you know, if we had to change the tooling or we had to change a, you know, a technique and it was going to cost a little bit more money, it was just a constant fight. So finally I just threw my hands up and I said, you know what, you guys, you just take it, just, you know, let me buy out, and you can have the name, you can do whatever you want with production, and I'm out of it. And that's what I did. And the cases are pretty much built like they were back in, you know, when I left back in 2003 and 2002. They haven't really changed much except in one important aspect. There's no padding inside the tubes. And this is really important because, you know, as I said, the first thing I wanted to do was create a case that can hold the cues in snugly and safely in case it gets inverted. That's like the #1 thing for us. So for me, it was the #1 thing. So anyway, over time, cues started to be made with these rubber grips and really tacky grips, and some, you know, sometimes like elephant ear or rubber. And this is incompatible with the way that Instroke builds cases, or built cases, the way that I built the cases with the padding inside the tube. So you'll notice here, this particular case right here came to me because, here, let me get a flashlight so you guys can see this real quick because it's important. So the deal here is that see if you guys can see inside there. Okay, you see that? This is, sorry, I'm trying to hold this up where you can see it. See this? That's foam rubber, what you're seeing in there. That's raw foam because the interior is out of it. Here, maybe you can see it better that way. I'm sorry, guys, about this. It's just I'm trying to, there we go. You guys see that? That means the liner is completely gone from the inside of that case, because what happened is somebody got a cue stuck in there, and then they had to basically rip the liner out. They had to rip the liner out to get the cue out. And then when they were done, they didn't even want to get it repaired at all. They just wanted to be rid of it. So so I ended up with it as they bought a JB case. And they haven't had any problems since, as far as I know. So in order to respond to these rubber grip cues, what they ended up doing was they ended up taking out the padding inside. So basically what happens is then you have it where now there's no padding. So everything can rattle, and you have a situation where things can fall out. See how easily that comes out now? But you also have incompatibility or inconsistency in how it's done. Watch this. So that's this side, right? Now on this side, they've stretched the fabric too much. So here, you actually end up with something along the lines of what I said before, where it would hold the cue inside. See, the cue doesn't fall out right there because they actually stretched the lining, and it basically made the middle, squeeze in like this. However, the problem with that is, now if someone with a rubber grip puts their cue in there, and as they pull it out, they twist a little bit, bam, it's bound up. Now it's locked up inside and it can't come out. So, so they've been inconsistent. One tube actually holds the cues in a little bit, the other tube does not, but it was not intentional. It was just an absolute mistake on the production part. They're just inconsistent in how they produced it. So that's obviously a problem, right? Okay. I could probably solve that problem. You know, I'm pretty sure I could, but since I don't have the company anymore, I'm not going to, of course, for them. But the point of it is that when somebody says to me or makes a comment on Facebook and says, well, Instroke cases are better than JB cases, I can't take that without comment. Now here, and I'm going to get to some of the other construction points on this case in just a moment. Here's a JB case that looks similar, so you'll see the scallops. You'll see we did the same scallop design on here, you know, and we have a lid, flip top lid, same type of strap here on the side, and so on, right? But here's the thing. With this case, number one, when you put the cue inside, you can go either direction. Look at this. See that? It's not going anywhere. But if you want to put your cue in this way, same thing. It's not going anywhere, and it's well padded. There's a lot of padding in between every part. So, see that? Nothing, no problem. But if you ever did have a problem with the interior in any way whatsoever, you know what you get to do? You get to reach in like this and pull it out. This is made of soft fabric backed with foam rubber between every single part in here. So every single part has nice foam rubber. So it's basically a nicely padded cushion bag inside of a tough tube. Now I'm going to get to the tube in just a moment and explain that, right? So the impetus for this was basically two things. Another genre of cases is the It's George style case or Fellini style case. And that's this one right here. So this was actually preceded by Fellini and Viking and the Brunswick style cases and so on, which were basically just tubes with fabric interior like that. So it's fabric cavities inside of a tube. Now this type of case here, you put the cue in, there it goes. But if you take this and you put a shaft in here, now it tightens it up a little bit, so it's not going to fall out quite as easily. See there? I let it go. It's not coming all the way out. If I take another shaft, let me find a shaft here. If I take another shaft and I put it in right beside it, now it's nice and snug inside there. You see that? So there you go. So it actually provides that a little bit of cushion because of the fabric, and that's a felt type fabric in there between each of the parts. So that's another genre of cases, different than the foam core and different than the tubes. And so that's number one, right? And then number two was in a debate with my friend Jack Justice, who's a case maker, another case maker, who started out making the tube style, and then he moved to the fabric interior.